Before humans stood a giant, I need advice. I joined the United States Army in 2002. I will spare the tiny details and give the gist of what I was doing before the events I am about to disclose. The crew I was with consisted of several different intellectuals of several different subjects. I was brought in to lead the physics branch of 5 people, including me. There was also a chemistry and biology branch totaling 15 different people, plus a guy who was under direct orders from the Secretary of Defense. None of the scientists knew why they had been called, nor how underprepared they or I suppose we all were. As you know, we have taken all of your means of communication with the outside world. The task that you 15 people have needs to be one of the best kept secrets ever. Wallace, the man who was giving orders, paced as he spoke. I will be the only way for any of you to communicate with the outside world. Any questions? The idea reminded me of how the atomic bombs were made, each scientist getting a piece of the puzzle without any idea of what the larger picture could be. One of the biologists, Lawrence, raised his hand. Why? What is the big secret? We will get to that subject in a moment. Please just follow my orders right now. We were ushered into a plane, then after several hours a helicopter, and then after that, a building. We made it to the location where we would be staying for the next several months, possibly years should we have to stay longer. The base was someplace in the middle of nowhere, probably in the Middle East, considering the time it took and the surroundings. The base looked dirty on the outside, appearing abandoned. Inside the base were 2 other people keeping the place warm and clean. The 2 greeted us and showed us around. We had all the basics, bedrooms, bathrooms, workplaces, etc. The place wasn't quickly built. They had planned for this for a long while before we were brought over. Looking at the walls and the technology in the building, they must have been planning this for years. In the center of the base, there was a shallow cave. We couldn't enter this center area immediately. The inside of the cave was highly radioactive. This meant that only 1 team at a time would be permitted to go inside the cave to get the data that they needed if they needed it. My team was chosen to go second. The excitement of discovering something new to help America infected each team member. After the first group of 5, the biologists returned from the cave. We wasted no time getting the protective gear and rushing inside. There wasn't much to the cave itself, but opposite the entrance was a statue of some strange face, black as coal. The face was larger than everyone, probably 8 feet tall. Whatever the face was made out of was very radioactive, emitting around 200 Röntgen. The artistry and detail of the statue amazed me, but it did not make sense yet. Why were we brought out in the first place? What was going on? After my group of 5 was done with our observations, we traded with the last group, and after the last group returned, we all were gathered in a room where Wallace began to speak. I apologize, there was some paperwork that needed to be signed. He sat down with the rest of us, shifting, visibly uncomfortable. What I say next may come to confuse you, or you won't believe it. He let out a long sigh before continuing. What you saw in that cave is older than any known life on Earth. Are you suggesting that aliens made that statue in that cave? Charlie, one of my physicist colleagues, blurted. That isn't a statue. He paused as what he was suggesting slowly began to sink in. That is the alien himself? Someone unfamiliar to me asked. That's definitely possible. But why did another person I didn't know very well began to speak but was quickly cut off. Let me speak. Wallace's voice was dark, demanding the attention of all of us. We know jack shit about this thing. Why we only found it now. Found it 2 years ago. Nobody knows anything. That is why you all are here. He paused. Now, it is your job to figure out its origins. Figure out how it functions and what we should do about it. The room was silent. Now, you are dismissed. I hope you all got all the samples and data you needed for today. You are only allowed to go in there with my supervision or by getting approval from Kendrick. Kendrick was one of the guys already here once we arrived. We all made quick work, everyone gathering as much information as possible. We spent the next few weeks examining, but other than our initial observations, we had no idea what to do next. We poked and prodded the thing, but got no reaction or anything. We couldn't get a pulse or find breathing. Its skin was harder than any Earth material, a mix of carbon and several different metals. During the long weeks of not finding anything new, Lawrence would sit next to me during some of our meals. The biologist and I had become somewhat of friends despite never meeting before this mission. He always made an attempt to get me to open up about my life and how I ended up as the lead in our physics branch of 5. Truth is, I am just good at math and I had no money, so I joined the army. Lawrence never liked that answer. It's too boring of an answer for a guy with good looks like you. Sorry, I'm not the main character with a tragic backstory. I'd always respond. Lawrence would then tell me about himself. I didn't care at all, but I'd still ended up entertaining him, trying to be polite. He would talk about his mom back home and how his dad was in the army before he passed away from some sort of cancer. He made the choice to join the army during his sophomore year of high school, working hard to get into the best army-related programs while attempting to maintain a social life. In such a social life, he would break the hearts of girls and even have his own heart broken, telling me names of girls I had never met. A far more fulfilling high school experience to contrast my high school experience, which lacked any real human connection. Seb or some other scientist would then sit down. Sebastian was a physicist under me and be forced to tell us both about himself. Lawrence brought a home-like feeling to a place that otherwise would put us all on edge. But we all still had work to do. A few of the guys were about to give up after 1 month, but on a random Saturday night, the thing opened his eyes. I was the first in the room this time. I was the first to make contact. I was the first to see his 2 amber irises they were glowing. The inferno of hell seemed to reach for me from those eyes. This giant was alive. The 4 other scientists who followed me paused. Shock, horror, and fear washed over them. Slowly, suddenly, loudly, this alien turned the ends of his mouth into a smile. Dust, soot, and ash broke free from its face. A low sound was emitted from the thing as we watched. Along with that sound, one of the Geiger counters began to show a massive increase in radiation. We were immediately called to leave the cave. We had to retreat outside of the initial building as the radiation became out of control. A couple hundred feet outside the building entrance, we were still getting signs of dangerous radiation. We had to set up an emergency camp. That night, we surveyed the entire area. The radiation from the thing now was cast out across just under a mile radius with the cave as the center. The small ensemble of scientists all gathered under one tent to discuss what the hell happened that morning. But none of us could come up with an explanation. The conclusion, or rather the solution, was that we needed better equipment, better and more accurate instruments, and, if possible, a way to dig this thing up. The next day, we got most of what we asked for and more. We now had 15 experimental suits that were supposed to be better equipped to help us reach this thing buried in the sand, alongside 15 more people who were all engineers. They brought instruments we had never seen before and showed us how to use them. There was one girl among those new 15 people. She gave me her latest invention, a stronger, better drill. It's simple but heavy. You carry that large battery, and the drill can drive a hole in anything. Thank you. This should help gather the samples we need. If it's all right, can I ask what kind of samples are you getting with such a drill? I mean, this isn't the most advanced technology. You could get the same effect with a larger drill, or even an explosive. She had an accusing look and tone that would have made any untrained person crack under the pressure. But if she didn't already know, she didn't need to know. There is a cave. Its structure is very unstable, but we need to get something out from the center. What is in the center? I can't disclose that right now. You know how the government is with its secrets. I add straps to the large battery, allowing it to be carried like a backpack. The 2 of us talk a bit more, mostly about conspiracy theories. After some time had passed, it was time for the original 15 scientists to return to the building and gather more data from the demonic statue. The closer we got, the more radioactive the area became. The inside of the building went from 0 Roentgens to 200 and rising. By the time we opened the door to the center of the building, their cave room was up to 750 Roentgens. The giant's eyes were still open, looking at us. A guy named Roland tried to speak to the thing. The thing was amused, letting out a similar noise to when we were last here. He was laughing, but none of us knew it yet. Before we could start using our new tools, the ground came out from under us, darkness swallowing us whole. I fell for what felt like forever before I hit the bottom. When I felt the ground under me, I took note of my surroundings. There were 3 of us in the vicinity. There was Lawrence, a guy I mentioned earlier. There was also a guy who I didn't associate much with, who people just called Grandpa, due to being over the age of 29 and being in the army, and there was me. Both me and Lawrence hurried over to help Grandpa as he was visibly hurt from the fall. I can't tell you why I and Lawrence didn't get hurt, but it most likely was the suit and the amount of protection the suit had. Hell, what the happened? Grandpa immediately cursed, swearing up a storm. Lawrence would check more data about the cave we were in as I attempted to radio anybody, but the signal was completely drowned out. Holy shit! Lawrence was in shock. I looked over. He was looking at the radiation levels. What is it? 10,000. 10,000 what? Take a guess. We are like in the center of the fucking sun. He was right, and it didn't make any sense. None of this did. The situation was impossible. 13 remain. A loud, booming voice filled the entire cave. The three of us all looked at each other. The voice was unfamiliar. It didn't belong to any of the men who came with us. "What does he want?" Lawrence asked nervously. "Let's get to the center and find out, damn it!" shouted Grandpa. "Quit shouting!" Lawrence snapped back. "Wait, where are we?" I asked. The three of us paused. Look up, left, right, and all around. We fell several hundred feet, but we could now touch the ceiling of this cave. The feeling of claustrophobia creeps up my spine as my eyes look into the shadows ahead, the long stone hallway we found ourselves in, seemingly endless. Darkness ahead of us, darkness behind us, no explanation of how we got here or where to go. The silence between the three of us was overwhelming, only to be broken by Lawrence taking a step forward, each step clicking and clacking on the solid, uneven ground. Grandpa followed him, and I helped Grandpa keep up. None of us spoke for about an hour, unsure if this was a dream, unsure about anything and everything. As Grandpa kept going, his breathing became more labored, and about the time we hit that 1 hour mark, Grandpa fell to the ground. A small beeping sound started to emit from his suit. Both me and Lawrence check on him. "Hey Grandpa, are you okay?" I asked, turning him over. "He's dead," Lawrence says grimly. "You're joking, right? He was walking just moments ago. How can someone just die?" Look. Sure enough, the suit was damaged. A small cut. The smallest cut on the inner thigh exposed the man to lethal radiation. It must have torn apart after walking for so long, or maybe after the fall wore down that area. 12. The same booming voice from earlier spoke and shook the ground, dust being disturbed, creating a light fog in the hall. A moment later, 11, 10. We had to get going again, deciding that if we made it out, we would come back to retrieve the body of Grandpa. The two of us continued forward in silence, moving along much faster now. 20 minutes after the 11th person went down, the 10th person also perished, leaving 9 of us. 40-ish minutes after that, Lawrence and I entered a large chasm in the earth. The rocky room was large, several hundred feet ahead of us. In the center of the supposed central area was a large figure. It was the thing that brought us here, standing tall over us with his amber eyes. The walls of this place were filled with entrances and other ways to go and leave, much like the long stretch of cave we came from. He was still smiling like before. The alien remained silent as Lawrence grabbed my shoulder to get me to look at him. "Hey, did you hear anything of what I just said?" "What?" "I said you should use that drill and dig into the thing. See if it bleeds." Lawrence spoke with revenge on his mind. I never heard him speak with such conviction. It wasn't until this moment did I realize how dire my situation was, how hopeless and how gruesome things were turning out. Someone died in front of me. He had a mom and dad, a wife who had his kid waiting for him to come home. But that man who was raised by a loving mom and dad, the husband who loved his wife, a father who has a kid who will never meet him, he doesn't come home. What would I say to them? Talking to Grandpa's family, what could I legally say? That family is never going to figure out how he truly died. I can't, I meekly responded. The thought of me dying here unceremoniously like Grandpa overwhelmed me. My eyes began to fog up as tears rolled down my face. Lawrence, unhappy with the emotion I was expressing, took the drill and tore its battery off of my back. I sat on the floor, left with nothing but my emotions. I couldn't see very well, nor could I clean my face of the tears, but I could hear Lawrence walk towards the large statue. Each step made a heavy sound. It wasn't long before he took the drill to the thing. The sound of metal on metal filled the entire cave and the several small offshoots that led to the room we happened upon. After 7 minutes of nonstop drilling, it suddenly turns quiet. Where there were once sparks of the drill, on the indestructible statue, was now darkness. My tears would eventually subside and dry on their own. I pat my suit down, looking for a flashlight. The only thing visible at the current moment was the low glow of orange and violence emitted from the eyes of the thing. 8! The noise shook the room hard, knocking me off my feet. "Lawrence, are you there?" I shout, praying that I'm not left alone with this monster. I crawled closer to the statue, where I saw Lawrence walking. I find his suit, his flashlight, and the drill. But it's almost as if he was... I turned on the flashlight. The dusty fog was replaced by a red mist. Lawrence's suit was empty. I opened the helmet, and there is a small beep letting me know it has been unlatched. Lawrence had just vanished, killed by the giant. Another man was killed unceremoniously. His mom will never know the truth of his death, how sudden it was. I didn't have long to think before I could hear voices coming from 2 different branches of the cave system. "Hello, anyone there?" one of the voices shouted. "Over here," said the other voices from the other end. I stood up. There were the other 7 members split 2 on my left and 5 on my right. I shone the flashlight to where the drill was trying to dig. It appears that Lawrence did manage to break through the skin, and the thing did bleed. A thick black substance slowly crawled out of the hole drilled out, almost like honey or tar. The thing made that dreadful noise. He laughed at us once again as the 2 other groups emerged from their respective branches. All 8 of us were now gathered at the belly of the earth, where this ancient alien had been trapped. I turned off my flashlight and hid beside the legs of the statue. I'm not sure what compelled me to do so, but it may have been a good decision. "Who is all here?" somebody asked. The other 7 men still standing were Seb, Nathan, Charles, Rick, Harris, Barry, Max, and Sheridan. Of course, I was the 8th. "Where is the 8th person?" asked Nathan. "I suppose it doesn't really matter," Seb responded. "We all are going to die anyway." "What do you think this thing wants us to do?" Max asked. The 7 of them all approach each other at one of the far ends of the room. Just moments after they all joined together, a loud noise was heard, like a gun. "7!" the voice called out. "What the?" Someone shouted. I didn't get a good view on what happened, but used one of our tools to put a hole in the head of Sheridan. The other men quickly pinned down Dick. "We have to kill each other. Only one of us can get out alive." I look over at the drill that Lawrence left behind. The giant laughed again, almost confirming. Silence. 6 remain. I couldn't figure out who killed. I would reason with myself that this was only for self-defense, that there had to be another way out. But before I could think, the 5 men behind me started to brawl. They began to fight like dogs, grabbing, punching, and throwing each other around. They began to grab at whatever tools they came in with that could be dangerous. Of course, it wasn't long before another gun-like shot rang through the chasm. The voice would boom, and the animals across from me continued to fight. I am ashamed that I didn't step in and stop them. The scene of my men fighting before me and killing each other haunts my dreams nightly. But I couldn't figure out how to get out of here. I should have been a better man. After a long time, only 1 man was standing. 2 remained. I clutched the drill in my hand. "Where are you?" It was Seb who screamed out. He was adopted and raised in a family that loved him. He had a wife, too. They met at some sort of gathering for active duty personnel. I emerged from my spot. He shone his light down on me. His shadow loomed as tall as the giant. "Don't make this difficult. I have a wife. You don't have anyone," Seb called out to me. He was right. I didn't have any family waiting for me. Not like how Seb has a family waiting for him. But I couldn't let myself just die. "I am sorry, Seb. I always hated that nickname." Seb dropped his flashlight and charged me with his tool. I lifted my drill, pointed it at him, and prepared it. He slowed himself to a walk, just a few steps away. He had brought the gun-like tool. The tool built up pressure and shot out a hollow steel-like tube, and when the tool retracted, it would have a sample of rock in the shape of a cylinder. The 2 of us stood there thinking of what to do next. I broke the silence by turning the drill on and letting it spin. I make a quick movement to jab at him with the spinning drill, and Seb takes a step back before driving the gun-like tool into the base of the drill and firing. The drill was busted now. I unplug it from the battery, still on my back. Seb takes another step towards me, trying to jab at me with the gun. I grab the heavy battery from my back, and using the straps attached to it, I swing it at Seb, hitting the side of his head. Seb knocked down and dazed. I proceeded to take the battery and bash it into the helmet of Seb's suit. And like that, I was the last one standing. I had satisfied the god, but at what cost? The blood of good men. The god spoke. "You have one wish, one wish." The silence dragged on. I had been playing a death game to win a prize that I couldn't fathom. Could I wish for anything? "I wish to go back in time before we come here and bring all of my crew back," I shout. "Their souls are already gone." The god laughed at me. He bent down, the soot and ash-like substance falling on me. On my level now, I could see into his eyes again. "What is your wish?" the tall god asked me one last time. Those hellish eyes will always be ingrained into my memory, but then I recalled my own home, where Mom and Dad waited for me. "I wish to never see you again." The god smiled as he opened his mouth and laid down, like one of those large faces at a carnival or circus that you walk in. I understood what he wanted me to do. Darkness swallowed me. When I woke up, there was warm sand under me and the hot sun beating down on me. The cave was gone. So was the camp that I stayed in just last night. I would eventually make it home, another story for another day, and I was honorably discharged. The situation has now been mostly swept under the rug. If you were to ask about the life of any of the people whose names I have written here, it would be said that they died in the war down in the Middle East. When asked about the god, they found they would laugh. That brings me to the modern day. They found the cave again. It moved someplace else somehow, and Wallace wants me back. I can't bear the thought of facing those amber eyes again. As long as there is a cave with a god in it, that god in it, people will die. Good people. As long as there is that damn cave, good people will turn on each other. Moreover, what if they find a way to weaponize the thing? What do I do? Well, that was pretty much it. I hope you liked the story till then. Bye-bye.